Welcome to the Foundry by Forge College. Today's explainer builds right on top of our last lesson, applying access control strategies by totally cracking open the architectural blueprints of smart contract security. We're going to establish a crystal clear mental model for access control in Solidity. Because, let's be real, building an impenetrable Web3 protocol is awesome unless you accidentally leave the back door wide open for literally anyone with the Wi-Fi connection.
So, here is our blueprint for today. We'll be looking at the access control dilemma, the sole owner pattern, the VIP list approach, the initial trust anchor, choosing your security blueprint, and finally, applying least privilege. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. The access control dilemma, choosing the right lock. To kick things off, we really need to understand the fundamental challenge developers face right at a smart contract's entry points. Basically, who holds the keys and who watches the watchers. We are constantly having to balance centralization versus granularity, right? And ease of reasoning versus upgradability. Why? Because handing the master key to the wrong person in Web3 isn't just a minor inconvenience where you have to call a locksmith, it is catastrophic. I mean, if you lose your house keys, you're locked out for an afternoon, sure. But if you mishandle the keys to a decentralized protocol, millions of dollars could vanish faster than you can say rug pull. So we have to design systems that are robust enough to keep the bad actors out, but still flexible enough to safely evolve over time.
Section 2. The sole owner pattern, or as I like to call it, the monarch.
So this is the classic, probably most recognizable ownership primitive out there. It's basically like a monarch holding a single master key to the entire castle. The code just asks a simple question: is the person calling this function the absolute, undisputed owner? If yes, come on in. If no, straight to the moat with you. Now, this provides very simple, clear, undeniable accountability. But, and it's a massive but, it is incredibly inflexible. It acts as a glaring single point of failure. If that one owner falls for a phishing scam or, accidentally drops their hardware wallet in a literal lake, your protocol is completely doomed. You are totally at the mercy of that one compromised key.
Section 3. The VIP list approach, the security team.
Okay, so if the ownership pattern is like a monarch, this primitive is more like a modern security team checking a VIP bouncer list. Instead of one single master key, the contract checks a ledger. It asks, hey, are you actually on the list for this specific room? In Solidity, this is typically handled by mapping an address to a Boolean value. The cool part, it's highly granular. You could have 5 different admins, and if one of them goes rogue, you can easily revoke access for just that one person without bringing down the whole system. But the trade-off here is complexity. You've got more state mutations, more ways to grant access, which means there are simply more chances for a developer to mess up and accidentally hand a VIP backstage pass directly to an attacker.
When you look at the trade-offs side by side, it's pretty eye-opening. Ownership gives you that simple accountability, but absolutely zero flexibility and a huge single point of failure. Role mapping, on the other hand, gives you that much-needed granularity, but it introduces high-state complexity. You would never, ever want to protect a super complex DeFi protocol with just a simple ownership lock. That's frankly terrifying. But by the same token, you wouldn't build a massive bureaucratic role registry for just a simple single admin treasury. You absolutely have to match the lock to the door.
Section 4. The initial trust anchor, the genesis moment.
Moving away from the locks themselves and looking at the building as a whole, we have to talk about the exact moment the construction crew hands over the keys, the constructor. Deploying a contract creates a massive initial trust assumption that is drawn straight into our architecture. When a contract is born, the code inside the constructor runs exactly once. And very often, developers will assign ownership to msg.sender right there in the constructor. By doing this, you are implicitly trusting whoever just clicked deploy.
Now, this initial trust anchor is really just the genesis. The crucial point here is that if you don't plan for how to transfer, renounce, or proxy that initial ownership to something like a secure multisig later on, well, your security model is permanently stuck in the past. Look, it's totally fine for the deployer to hold the key for convenience during initial testing, but you absolutely must have explicit lifecycle functions baked right in to securely decentralize that power before you ever hit production.
Section 5. Choosing your security blueprint, the workflow. So now that we've seen the primitives, how do we actually decide which lock to draft into our code? Well, we use a really straightforward 4-step workflow, something we emphasize heavily in our advanced courses across the Forge College community. Step 1. Identify your minimum set of privileged actions, like what actually needs protecting. Step 2. Determine your lifecycle and revocation needs. Step 3. Consider off-chain delegation and automation. And Step 4. Apply least privilege. This systematic approach takes you from staring blankly at your screen to locking down a rock-solid protocol design. Matching the lock to the door becomes incredibly logical when you actually map it out like this. Got a single maintainer doing basic CLI upgrades? Simple ownership is totally fine. But what about token minting? Yeah, you definitely want role mapping there because you might have multiple authorized mentors. Now, for an emergency protocol pause, you might use ownership, but you'd want to proxy it through a multisig or time lock just to stop a single rogue actor from halting everything. And for a complex admin panel, you absolutely need granular, feature-specific role mappings. It's all about minimizing the blast radius. If someone hacks the marketing admin's key, there is no way they should be able to turn around and drain the entire treasury.
Section 6. Applying least privilege. The golden rule.
Listen, if you take only one concept away from this entire explainer, please let it be this: the principle of least privilege. You need to give people only the exact access they strictly need to do their specific jobs and absolutely nothing more. Never, ever create a super admin who can do everything if you can possibly avoid it. Narrow, purpose-specific roles ensure that an exploit in one tiny area doesn't grant an attacker the master key to your entire digital vault. Fundamentally, it is all about compartmentalizing your risk.
To quickly summarize today's explainer, ownership yields simplicity and a single point of accountability. Role mappings yield granularity and mutability. Constructors create initial trust anchors that absolutely demand explicit lifecycle plans, and always prefer narrowly scoped roles over a catch-all admin. But keep this in mind. A beautifully designed, military-grade lock is completely useless if a developer accidentally leaves a side window wide open by leaving an internal function unprotected.
So, I'll leave you with this. If your protocol's master key was compromised today, does your blueprint allow for survival or total collapse? Keep that provocative thought in your head as you review your own smart contract code, and especially as you head into our next lesson on implementing production-ready ownable guards. Thanks so much for learning with us today. Be sure to visit forge.college to explore our courses and master the rest of this smart contract security track. See you in the next one.